Welcome to this deep dive. We're starting today with a scenario that I guarantee every single person listening can relate to.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so think about your life for a second. We spend, massive amounts of time, energy, and anxiety obsessing over the really monumental decisions.
Right. Who to marry, what career path to pursue.
Exactly. Or whether to take out a mortgage on that house. We agonize over those. But in doing so, we tend to completely ignore the ordinary moments.
We just brush right past them.
We do. We treat the thousands of little daily interactions as if they're just filler. But the sources we're analyzing today make a bold and frankly mind-blowing claim.
And it is a massive claim.
It is. The claim is that it's actually those totally ordinary, seemingly invisible moments that dictate your ultimate success or failure because they determine your position.
Position really is the foundation of every outcome you experience.
Yeah.
If you think about it, making a good decision from a terrible position is, well, it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
But making a mediocre decision from a great position, it'll probably still turn out fine.
The materials we're looking at use a brilliant analogy for this. Think about playing the game of Tetris.
Oh, the Tetris analogy is perfect.
Right. When you're playing well, your board is clean, you're in a great position, and you have dozens of options for where to put that next piece. You are in total control of the board.
You're dictating the game.
Exactly. But when you're playing poorly, and those blocks are jagged and they're piling up to the very top of the screen, you desperately need just the right piece.
Usually that long, straight one.
Always the long, straight one. You need it to save your life. When your position is bad, your options shrink to almost zero.
And that's where the panic sets in.
Yeah. So the entire goal of this deep dive is to help you play life like a pro, so you're always operating from a position of strength rather than a state of panic.
To do that, we have to look under the hood at the mechanics of our own minds. We're drawing heavily today on Shane Parrish's extensive research on clear thinking.
Right.
His work is incredibly revealing about human nature.
So the overarching mission today is to unpack Parrish's insights, to understand exactly why our biology so frequently hijacks our brains. We want to figure out how to build the mental strength and really install the practical safeguards to reclaim control of our choices.
What's fascinating here is that we often don't even realize we are making choices in these ordinary, everyday moments.
We really don't.
We walk around assuming we're highly logical creatures. The reality is, a lot of the time, we aren't actually thinking at all. We're simply reacting based on ancient, hardwired biological instincts.
The situation itself is doing the thinking for us.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want you, the listener, to think about a recent time you just snapped and lashed out at a coworker over a minor mistake.
We've all been there.
Or a time you stubbornly dug your heels into an argument with a spouse, even when deep down you suspected you were probably wrong.
The classic double down.
Yeah, the double down. You look back a day later and think, what on earth was I thinking?
Well, you weren't. You were caught in what psychologists call the stimulus-response gap.
And that gap is everything, right?
It is everything. In the space between a stimulus, let's say a perceived insult or a sudden crisis, and your response to it, you have a very brief, crucial window.
Just a tiny sliver of space.
Right. And in that space, you either pause and apply conscious reason, or you hand over the steering wheel to your biological defaults.
And these defaults are just behavioral programs, right? Written into our DNA over hundreds of thousands of years.
Exactly. They kept our ancestors alive in the wild. But if you deploy them in a modern corporate office or a grocery store aisle, they usually just create disaster.
So the research identifies 4 main enemies of clear thinking, 4 of these powerful biological defaults. Let's start with the first one, the emotion default.
A big one.
Yeah, this is the tendency to respond to our feelings instead of facts. And what strikes me is that nobody is immune to this. It's easy to assume that highly trained professionals have this totally under control.
You'd assume that, but it simply isn't true. The author brings up the tragic comedy of the Olympic shooting prodigy, Matthew Emmons.
Oh man, this story.
It is such a heartbreaking but perfect example. Emmons was standing there, poised to win his 2nd Olympic gold medal. The pressure is unimaginable.
I can't even fathom it.
All he had to do was make one final, fairly routine shot. He aims, he fires, and he hits a perfect bullseye. But he gets a score of absolute 0.
Wait, how does a professional even do that? A perfect bullseye for 0 points.
Because he shot at the wrong target.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he fired into the lane next to him. Emmons had a very strict routine. He was supposed to check the number above the target through his scope before lowering the rifle to the bullseye.
But he didn't check the number.
No. In that high-pressure moment, he was entirely consumed by his internal emotional state. He was trying so desperately to calm himself down, to manage his pounding heart rate, that his emotions completely hijacked his cognitive process.
He was focused entirely on how he felt.
Exactly. He skipped the first crucial step of checking the number, and it cost him the gold medal.
It's terrifying when you realize that your emotions can literally multiply years of hard work by 0 in a single instant.
Just like that.
And it's easy for us to sit back and judge him and say, well, just stick to your routine. But when the biology takes over, logic just evaporates.
It's completely gone.
Which leads us to the second enemy, and this is a massive one, the ego default. So how does ego differ from just being emotional?
The ego default is highly specific. It is our primal urge to protect our self-image and our status within a social hierarchy. Evolutionarily, status meant survival.
Right. If you're at the bottom of the tribe, you didn't eat.
Precisely. So today, we're wired to defend our psychological territory just as fiercely as our physical territory. Because of this, we strongly prefer feeling right over being right.
We will bulldoze pure logic just to protect our pride.
Always. There was a wild historical example of this in the text regarding Benedict Arnold.
Yeah, most of us are taught he betrayed America because he lost faith in the cause or had some grand ideological shift.
The historical reality is much pettier. It was almost entirely about ego. Arnold felt chronically underappreciated. He was furious that younger officers were being promoted ahead of him.
So his pride was already wounded.
Deeply wounded. And on top of that, he was drowning in massive financial debt. He had married into the wealthy Shippen family, and he was desperately trying to project this image of superiority and high status to impress his new in-laws.
Keeping up appearances.
Exactly. When his perceived status was continually threatened, his ego default completely took the wheel. He wasn't reasoning through the long-term historical consequences of treason. He was just reacting to the immediate sting of a damaged self-image.
And we do the exact same thing on a micro scale all the time to protect our own self-image. There's this highly relatable anecdote the author shares about a guy we'll call Mr. Rolex.
I love this story.
Right. So when the author was a teenager working as a grocery store cashier, this incredibly wealthy customer with a fancy watch was just relentlessly rude to him.
Just awful.
Yeah, the guy was essentially demanding the cashier hurry up because his expensive time was vastly more valuable than a teenager's time.
And how did the cashier process that?
Well, he didn't just brush it off. On the walk home, he mentally reorganized the entire world's hierarchy in his head to protect his ego.
Because he had to win somehow.
Exactly. He told himself, well, I might just be a kid working for minimum wage, but at least I'm not a miserable, superficial jerk like that guy.
Right.
We constantly and unconsciously redraw the social scoreboard so that we always end up winning. That is the ego at work. It feels good, but it completely blinds us to reality.
It acts as a psychological shield, but it prevents you from objectively analyzing your situation. Now, the third enemy relies on other people. It's the social default.
The tribe mentality.
Exactly. This is our deep biological urge to conform to the tribe. Again, if we look back thousands of years, if you stood out or got separated from the group, you died.
Isolation meant death.
So today, we are absolutely terrified of standing out, especially when making decisions.
That makes total sense in a tribal setting, but how does that manifest today?
It shows up as collective mediocrity. The research quotes the legendary investor Warren Buffett on this, and he perfectly captures the corporate reality of the social default.
What did he say?
Buffett noted that failing conventionally is the preferred route for most professionals. He said, as a group, lemmings may have a rotten image, but no individual lemming has ever received bad press.
Wait, so Buffett is basically saying it's safer for your career to just follow the herd right off a cliff. That sounds incredibly cynical.
It sounds cynical, but it is a deeply practical observation of human behavior.
Yeah.
There is tremendous comfort in the collective. If you do what everyone else in your industry is doing and the whole thing crashes, you can shrug your shoulders and say to your boss, well, everyone else got it wrong too.
And you usually keep your job.
You do. But if you stick your neck out, try something completely unconventional, and it fails. You are the outcast. You take all the blame.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The source material argues that true success requires the shamelessness to look like an idiot for a while.
It's the only way.
You simply cannot achieve unconventional, extraordinary results by following conventional wisdom. You have to be willing to break from the lemmings, even when it feels socially dangerous.
Which is incredibly difficult, because breaking away requires fighting the fourth and final enemy, the inertia default.
Right.
This is our tendency to resist change at all costs and stick to the status quo. It keeps us in what the author calls the zone of average.
Because we're fundamentally habit-forming creatures.
We are. It takes a massive amount of cognitive and physical energy to start something new. But surprisingly, it takes just as much energy to stop doing something familiar.
Oh, absolutely. Think about how many people stay in terrible jobs or unfulfilling relationships for years. It usually isn't because they're actively waking up and choosing to be miserable.
No, it's just the default.
Right. It's just that the perceived friction of changing the situation feels too high. A body at rest tends to stay at rest. So we have these four massive biological forces: emotion, ego, social conformity, and inertia.
Constantly pulling us away from clear thinking.
And we obviously can't just rely on raw willpower to fight them off, because willpower eventually depletes.
Willpower is a terrible long-term strategy. Instead, the author suggests we have to actively build strength and meticulously manage our weaknesses. Let's look at the four key strengths required: self-accountability, self-knowledge, self-control, and self-confidence.
Let's break those down, because they sound a bit like buzzwords until you see them in practice. Let's start with self-accountability. I know there's a pretty gripping story from the author's own life about this.
There is. During his time writing code for an intelligence agency, he was tasked with delivering a highly critical piece of mission software. But a massive snowstorm hit, and his bus was delayed by 2 hours.
Okay, totally out of his control.
Right. When he finally walked into the office and immediately started making excuses to his senior colleague about the bus, the weather, the roads, his colleague just completely shut him down.
What did he say?
He looked at him and said, "I don't care. Don't blame the bus for being late. Buy a car."
Ouch. That sounds incredibly harsh. I mean, he couldn't control the snowstorm.
It sounds brutal in the moment, but it's a profound lesson in accountability. The world does not care about your excuses, even if those excuses are perfectly valid and entirely out of your control.
Yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, taking absolute ownership is the only way to move forward. You cannot control the weather, but you can always control your response to it. When you blame the bus, you give away your power to the bus.
Oh, that's a great way to frame it.
When you own the outcome, regardless of fault, you empower yourself to find a solution.
So if accountability is about owning the outcome, how do we prevent ourselves from making massive mistakes in the first place? That brings us to self-knowledge. How is that defined here?
Self-knowledge is really about knowing the exact, unyielding boundaries of your own competence. There's a great example of a highly successful real estate investor who was offered a piece of a lucrative, seemingly guaranteed private equity deal.
A sure thing.
A sure thing. All his peers were jumping on it. The social pressure was huge. But he passed. When asked why, he simply stated, "I don't know anything about that space."
The discipline to say, I don't know when money is on the table is rare.
It is an absolute superpower. Knowing what you don't know keeps you from playing games you are mathematically guaranteed to lose. But to admit that, you need the next strength: self-confidence.
And we need to be careful here because people frequently mistake confidence for arrogance.
Very often.
Arrogance is the ego hiding insecurity. True confidence is what allows you to comfortably admit what you don't know without feeling threatened.
Exactly.
And the research makes a great point that confidence isn't just something you are born with. You don't just wake up one day and have it. It is earned.
It takes work.
The author shares a story of taking his son cliff jumping. They get up to the 25-foot drop, and the kid just absolutely freezes. He's terrified.
Natural.
Right. To get him through it, the author didn't just yell at him to be brave or just jump. He had his son consciously change his internal dialogue. He asked his son to recount out loud all the times he had been terrified in the past, like trying snowboarding for the first time and how he had successfully overcome it.
That's brilliant.
Confidence is earned by constantly reminding yourself of the past hardships you have already navigated. It's a track record you build with yourself.
That internal track record is vital. Self-control, the fourth strength, is really the application of the other three. But even with all these internal strengths firing, you still need to actively curate your external environment.
You have to aggressively raise your standards.
As the saying goes, you inevitably become a reflection of the people you spend the most time with.
Yeah.
If you want to think clearly, You need to establish a personal board of directors.
You mean surrounding yourself with exemplars who set an uncompromisingly high bar?
Precisely. You need people who force you out of the inertia default. There is a famous story about former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger that illustrates this perfectly.
I've heard this one. It's brutal.
It is. A staffer handed him a detailed report. Kissinger looked at it and asked, "Is this your best work?" The staffer, feeling suddenly insecure, admitted it probably wasn't and took it back to rewrite it.
It didn't even read it?
Nope. He handed it in a few days later, and Kissinger asked the exact same question. "Is this your best work?" The staffer rewrote it a second time.
Oh.
Finally, on the third attempt, the staffer firmly said, "Yes, Mr. Secretary, this is my absolute best work." And Kissinger replied, "Okay, now I'll read it."
I love that. He never even read the first two drafts. It forces the person to critically evaluate themselves against a higher standard before they even dare to present their work.
It's a safeguard against mediocrity.
But look, even if we build all this internal strength and we surround ourselves with demanding exemplars, we are still human. We get tired, our strength fails. And that is why the text emphasizes the need for safeguards.
Safeguards are brilliant. They're essentially pre-programmed rules we put in place to protect us from ourselves when we know we will be weak.
Give me an example.
For example, the brilliant Nobel laureate psychologist Daniel Kahneman had a strict personal safeguard. He would never say yes to a professional request while on the phone. Never.
Not even a small request.
Nothing. He knew his own psychology. He knew he was highly susceptible to the social default and the immediate pressure to please the person on the other end of the line. So he implemented a hard rule. He always required the person to email him, giving him the space to think before committing.
That removes the emotion from the moment entirely. Another incredibly practical safeguard mention is the Hays-Alt method.
Yes, Hays-Alt.
It's a mental checklist you run before making any significant decision. Are you hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? Hays-Alt.
If any of those four things are true, your biology is actively compromising your cognitive abilities.
You have to address the biological need, eat a sandwich, take a nap before you make the choice.
And we shouldn't think of safeguards as just personal life hacks. They apply to massive organizational leadership too. Consider the story of Commander Michael Abrashoff of the USS Benfold.
Oh, this is a great leadership case study.
When he took command, it was one of the worst performing ships in the entire U.S. Navy. Morale was abysmal. Now, the conventional leadership approach would be to demand new technology, increase discipline, or fire the underperformers.
So what did he do differently?
He realized the problem wasn't the crew. It was a cultural blind spot created by the hierarchy. The officers were treating the junior sailors like second-class citizens. For instance, the officers would routinely cut to the very front of the food line and eat their meals in a separate, nicer room.
Creating an immediate divide.
Huge divide. Abrashoff realized he needed a safeguard against his own ego and the institutional ego. So he shifted his frame of reference. He simply refused to jump the line. He waited in the back with the junior sailors, and he chose to eat his meals with them.
It seems like such a tiny, almost insignificant gesture.
But the impact was massive. That single shift in perspective, breaking down the artificial hierarchy, completely transformed the culture. By managing the ego default at the top, he made the Benfold one of the absolute best, most efficient ships in the fleet.
It's incredible how managing your own defaults can elevate hundreds of other people. So let's say we've done the work. We've managed the defaults, we've implemented safeguards, and we've created that crucial space to reason. We are finally ready to actually make a decision. The research makes a very sharp distinction here. A choice is not the same thing as a decision.
They are totally different animals. A choice is just mindlessly picking an available option. You choose to hit the snooze button. You choose to scroll on your phone. A decision involves conscious, deliberate, and rigorous evaluation.
Right.
And the absolute first step of a true decision is defining the problem accurately. Most people completely skip this step. They rush into solution mode and end up treating symptoms instead of root causes.
So what does this all mean in practice? How do we find the root cause?
There is a fantastic case study in the book involving the downtown dog rescue in Los Angeles. If you walk into almost any animal shelter and ask what their biggest problem is, they will say, "We have too many dogs and not enough space. How do we get more people to adopt?"
Which seems like the logical question.
They assume the problem is a lack of adopters. But the downtown dog rescue stepped back and asked a different question entirely. Why are these dogs entering the shelter system in the first place?
They looked at the top of the funnel instead of the bottom.
Exactly. They dug into the data, and found something shocking. A massive night. 30% of the dogs weren't strays. They were owner surrenders.
30%.
And they were usually surrendered due to sudden, severe financial hardship. A family couldn't afford a mandatory $10 rabies shot, or they lost their job and couldn't afford a bag of dog food, so they tearfully gave up a beloved family pet. The shelter realized the root problem wasn't a lack of adopters. The root problem was temporary poverty.
So instead of spending thousands housing the dogs, what did they do?
They started paying for the dog food and covering the cost of the rabies shots. By addressing the root cause, they kept the dogs with their loving families. It was vastly cheaper and emotionally far more effective than taking the dogs into the shelter system.
They bypassed the symptom and cured the disease. That is brilliant. Okay, so once you have defined the real problem, you move to exploring solutions. And this requires confronting reality, which isn't always pleasant.
It rarely is pleasant. The text introduces a concept called the Stockdale Paradox, named after Admiral James Stockdale. He survived 8 agonizing years as a prisoner of war in Vietnam. When asked who didn't make it out of the camps, Stockdale observed something counterintuitive. He said it was the optimists.
You'd think the optimists would be the most resilient.
You would think so, but the optimists were the ones who kept saying, "We'll be out by Christmas." And then Christmas would come and go. Then they'd say, "We'll be out by Easter," and Easter would pass. Stockdale said they eventually died of a broken heart.
That's devastating.
The survivors were the ones who possessed the Stockdale Paradox. They maintained an unwavering faith that they would ultimately prevail in the end, but they simultaneously had the fierce discipline to confront the brutal, ugly facts of their current daily reality.
You cannot just blindly hope a problem goes away with toxic positivity. You have to face the brutal facts. And once you do, you apply what the research calls second-level thinking.
This is a crucial tool.
First-level thinking just solves the immediate pain. But second-level thinking always asks, and then what? Let me give you a basic example.
Yeah.
If I'm stressed and eat a massive chocolate bar right now, it solves my immediate craving. That is first-level thinking.
Right.
And then what? An hour later, I have a massive sugar crash, my mood plummets, and I ruin my productivity for the rest of the afternoon. First-level thinking creates a second-level disaster.
The author provides a great professional example of this with a data scientist named Maria. She loses her job and faces a crossroads. She has to choose between taking a lower-paying job immediately or taking out loans to go back to school for a master's degree.
Classic dilemma.
First-level thinking just looks at the immediate income of the job versus the immediate debt of the tuition. It's a simple, short-term calculation.
But applying second-level thinking forces her to map out the cascading consequences over time.
Right. Asking. And then what forces Maria to look at the whole chessboard? If she takes the lower paying job, and then what? She might get stuck on a much lower earning trajectory for the next 10 years. If she goes to school and takes on debt, and then what? She opens up higher tier opportunities that could pay off the debt in 2 years and elevate her entire career.
Second-level thinking moves you out of the immediate moment.
It does.
And as you are mapping out that chessboard, there is another trap you have to actively avoid. Binary thinking. We absolutely love to present ourselves with false either dilemmas. We say things like, do I quit this job and risk bankruptcy, or do I stay here and be miserable forever?
Those aren't the only 2 options.
The author demands we use the 3+ principle. If you only have 2 options on the table, you simply are not thinking hard enough. You must force yourself to generate a 3rd option.
Often that 3rd option is what they call a both-and solution. It refuses the premise of the binary entirely.
Is there a good business example of someone actually pulling that off?
Isidore Sharp, the founder of the Four Seasons hotel chain, is the perfect example. When he was starting out, the hospitality industry told him he had to make a binary choice. The conventional wisdom was you either build a small, intimate motel with incredible personal service, or you build a massive, impersonal convention center with lots of great amenities. You couldn't have both.
So what did he do?
Sharp refused the binary. He asked, why can't I do both? He created a 3rd option, a hotel that offered the intimacy and highly personalized service of a small motel, combined with the world-class amenities of a massive convention center. By breaking the binary, he revolutionized the entire luxury hospitality industry.
He saw right through the false constraints. But even when you generate multiple options, you still have to choose one. And to truly evaluate them, you have to understand the concept of opportunity costs. This is different from binary thinking. Opportunity cost means that every single choice you make has a hidden price tag, the sacrifice of the alternative.
The ultimate historical example of weighing opportunity costs is a story about a young Andrew Carnegie. Long before he was a steel magnate, he was working as a manager for the Pennsylvania Railroad. One day, a massive train wreck completely gridlocked the entire system. Nothing could move in either direction. His boss was unreachable.
A total nightmare.
Now, the conventional first-level thinking approach would be to send in crews to carefully and slowly clear the tracks in order to salvage the derailed train cars.
Which makes sense, right? Train cars are incredibly expensive company property.
Direct costs, yes. But Carnegie looked beyond the direct costs and calculated the hidden opportunity cost. A gridlocked railway meant the entire company was bleeding astronomical amounts of money by the minute because freight and passengers were paralyzed. The direct cost of a few damaged train cars was absolutely nothing compared to the massive opportunity cost of a paralyzed rail system.
So what did he do?
He issued a shocking order. Burn the cars. He had his men set the wrecked, expensive train cars on fire to clear the tracks instantly so they could get the massive economic engine of the railroad moving again. He happily sacrificed the cars to buy back time.
The panic of the middle managers watching those cars burn must have been incredible, but his logic was flawless.
This raises an important question for all of us. What hidden trade-offs are you ignoring in your own life? We easily see the direct cost of things. We see the sticker price on a new car, but we rarely calculate the hidden opportunity costs, the extra hours you will spend commuting to pay for it, the family experiences you gave up to afford the payments, the mental energy drained by maintaining it. Great decision makers always price in the hidden invisible costs.
Okay, we have covered an incredible amount of psychological ground today. Let's bring all these threads together. The ultimate goal of this deep dive isn't just to give you some cool historical anecdotes to sound smarter at a dinner party. The goal is to help you fundamentally shift your approach to daily life so you prioritize long-term outcome over short-term ego. By recognizing and managing your biological defaults, setting incredibly high standards through the exemplars you surround yourself with, utilizing strict safeguards when you know your willpower is weak, and engaging in second-level thinking, you ensure that the ordinary, seemingly invisible moments of your life are constantly improving your position for the future.
I want to address you, the listener, directly for a moment. Every single day, whether you realize it or not, you are the hero of the story you tell yourself. The real question is, what kind of hero are you going to be moving forward? Are you going to remain a passive victim, constantly hijacked by your ancient biological defaults, reacting blindly to whatever problems the world throws at you? Or are you going to intentionally carve out the space to pause, to apply reason, and to command your own destiny? The choice is entirely yours.
And to help you make that choice, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to mull over today. We learned that our environment heavily programs our defaults and that we unconsciously adopt the standards of those around us. So look closely at your inner circle today. Who is currently sitting on your personal board of directors without you even realizing it? And more importantly, wait, let me rephrase that. And more importantly, are they quietly programming you to react or to reason?